At some point in your life, you had a number. Maybe it was a salary. Maybe it was a savings target. Maybe it was the point at which you told yourself you'd finally feel financially secure. Feel like you had enough. Feel like you could stop worrying and start living. And at some point, you reached that number, or close to it, and you felt briefly the way you thought you would. And then, within weeks or months, the feeling faded. The number that was supposed to be enough no longer felt like enough, and somewhere ahead of you, there was a new number, a new threshold, a new point at which things would finally feel different. This is not a budgeting problem. It is not hedonic adaptation, which we covered in episode 3. It is something slightly different, and in some ways, more relentless. It is the fact that your brain does not measure your wealth in dollars. It measures it in comparison, against your neighbors, your colleagues, your social feed, your generation, your own rising expectations. And in a world where the wealthiest lives in human history are visible to everyone with a phone, that comparison is almost impossible to win. Today, we're going to explain exactly why and what you can actually do about it. Tom is 39. He has had 4 salary increases in 8 years, each one significant. When he was earning $52,000, he told himself that $75,000 would feel like security. When he reached $75,000, he told himself that $100,000 would be the turning point. When he passed $100,000, the feeling lasted about 3 months before it was replaced by a quiet awareness of what people around him had that he didn't. He is not ungrateful. He knows, intellectually, that he is doing well by any reasonable measure. He has a house. His children go to good schools. He takes holidays. He is, by the standards of most of the world and most of human history, wealthy. And yet, the feeling of financial sufficiency, of genuinely having enough, has never arrived. Each milestone has delivered a brief window of satisfaction, then receded, revealing the next threshold. The finish line keeps moving. What Tom is experiencing is not ingratitude. It is not a character flaw. It is a predictable, well-documented psychological mechanism that has been studied since the 1950s, and that has become significantly more powerful in the era of social media, where the most visible lifestyles belong to the most affluent people in the world, and they are available to everyone, every day, for free. The mechanism has 2 names, and understanding both of them is the only way to stop them running your financial life. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger published a theory that would go on to underpin decades of research into wealth, happiness, and human satisfaction. He called it social comparison theory, and its core claim was deceptively simple. Human beings do not evaluate their circumstances in absolute terms. They evaluate them relative to other people. You do not ask, "Do I have enough?" You ask, "Do I have enough compared to the people around me?" And the people around you are not stable. They change as you change. As your income rises, your reference group shifts, and so does your baseline for what enough looks like. This is the mechanism behind relative deprivation, the psychological state of feeling deprived not because of what you lack in absolute terms, but because of what you lack relative to others. Research from the University of Essex found that personal relative deprivation, the resentment that comes from believing you have less than you deserve compared to your peers, is one of the strongest predictors of materialistic values. Not poverty, not objective scarcity. The feeling of comparative disadvantage, regardless of absolute wealth. Which means that a person earning $200,000 a year in a social circle, earning $400,000, can experience a more acute sense of financial insufficiency than a person earning $50,000 in a peer group earning $45,000. The absolute number is almost irrelevant. What matters to the brain is the gap. Your brain doesn't measure what you have. It measures what you have compared to who you're looking at. Change who you're looking at, and your entire experience of wealth changes. This is also why social media has made the problem dramatically worse. For most of human history, your comparison group was your village, your neighborhood, your workplace. The people whose lives you could observe were people broadly similar to you in circumstance. Now, the comparison group is everyone. The most successful people in every field, the most traveled, the most beautifully housed, the most financially free, all visible, all the time, all presenting a curated version of their lives that is designed to look as aspirational as possible. Your brain runs the same social comparison algorithm Festinger described in 1954. It just has infinitely more data to work with, and almost all of it points upward. In 1974, economist Richard Easterlin published a finding that economists at the time largely dismissed, and that has been debated, refined, and substantially confirmed ever since. He was studying the relationship between income and happiness, and he noticed something that didn't fit the prevailing economic model. At any given point in time, wealthier people within a country reported being happier than poorer people. That part made sense. But when he looked at countries over time, at what happened to average happiness as nations grew richer, the relationship disappeared. The United States became dramatically wealthier between 1955 and 2005. Average income roughly tripled in real terms. By almost any material measure, life got significantly better. The percentage of people who described themselves as very happy in 1955, roughly the same as in 2005. Japan experienced one of the most extraordinary periods of economic growth in history after World War II. Happiness scores in 1958 were similar to happiness scores 30 years later. Easterlin's explanation was precisely what Festinger's social comparison theory would predict. As everyone's income rises together, no one's relative position changes. The comparison group gets richer at the same rate you do. The gap stays the same. And it is the gap, not the absolute level, that drives the sense of financial satisfaction or insufficiency. This is what Easterlin called the paradox. More money, collectively, does not produce more happiness, because happiness is not a function of absolute wealth. It is a function of relative wealth. And relative wealth is, by definition, a zero-sum game. Someone has to be below the median. For every person above it, someone is below. The implication for Tom, and for you, is uncomfortable, but important. No income level will produce the permanent feeling of financial sufficiency you are looking for, if that feeling depends on comparison. Because the comparison group rises with you. The goalposts move, the finish line relocates, and the brain, running its ancient comparison algorithm, simply recalibrates to the new normal and looks upward again. The only way off this treadmill is to change what the brain is comparing against, not the income. The reference point. You cannot turn off social comparison. It is as fundamental to human cognition as loss aversion, present bias, or any of the other mechanisms we have covered in this series. What you can do is influence which comparisons your brain makes most frequently and add a metric to your financial life that the comparison game cannot erode. 3 strategies. Each one is about changing the reference point, not the income. Strategy 1. Compare downward, deliberately and consciously. Social comparison research distinguishes between upward comparison, measuring yourself against people who have more, and downward comparison, measuring yourself against people who have less. Upward comparison reliably produces dissatisfaction. Downward comparison reliably produces gratitude and a sense of sufficiency. The problem is that social media, advertising, and most of the modern information environment are designed to maximize upward comparison. The algorithm serves you the most aspirational content because aspiration drives engagement. Your brain is being fed a diet of upward comparison by default, and it responds exactly the way Festinger's research predicts. The first strategy is a deliberate intervention. Introduce regular, structured downward comparison into your life. Not as a self-congratulatory exercise, but as a calibration. This could mean reading about economic conditions in countries with lower average incomes, volunteering in contexts where you encounter genuine financial hardship, or simply spending time with people whose reference group is materially different from yours. The goal is not to feel superior. It is to give your brain accurate data about where you actually stand, not the distorted picture provided by a social feed algorithmically optimized to make you feel insufficient. Strategy 2. Compare to your past self, not other people. The most powerful reorientation in wealth psychology is replacing horizontal comparison against peers with vertical comparison against your own history. Where were you financially 5 years ago? 10 years ago? What could you not afford then that is now ordinary? What options do you have today in housing, healthcare, education, security that an earlier version of you would have considered aspirational? This is not nostalgia. It is a deliberate reassignment of the reference point. When you measure yourself against your own past, the comparison is always moving in the right direction because your circumstances are almost certainly better than they were, even when they feel insufficient relative to your peers. Tom, at $100,000 a year, feels insufficient next to a colleague earning $180,000. But Tom, at $100,000, has options, security, and freedom that Tom, at $52,000, would have considered extraordinary. The comparison is available to him. He just has to choose to make it. Strategy 3. Measure wealth in options, not income. The third strategy is the most structural, and the one that most directly addresses the Easterlin paradox. Income is a relative measure. It will always be larger or smaller than someone else's. Net worth is also a relative measure. These metrics are inherently comparative and therefore inherently vulnerable to the exact mechanism we have been discussing. But there is a measure of financial progress that is much harder for social comparison to erode: optionality. The number of meaningful choices available to you that were not available before. Could you take 3 months off work without financial catastrophe? Could you leave a job you hate without immediate crisis? Could you weather a significant unexpected expense without going into debt? Could you retire 5 years earlier than the standard timeline if you chose to? These are not income questions. They are freedom questions. And they are much harder for your brain to compare against a colleague's social feed, because most people do not post their savings rate, their emergency fund, or their capacity to walk away from something that isn't working. When you measure your financial progress in terms of options and freedom rather than income and possessions, you are measuring something that genuinely compounds over time, and that the social comparison engine has very little data about. You are, quietly, winning a game that nobody else can see. Tom still gets the promotions. He still gets the salary increases. He still sometimes feels the pull of what his colleagues have that he doesn't. But he made one change about a year ago that shifted something. He stopped measuring his financial progress in income, which was always going to be relative, always going to be insufficient next to someone, and started measuring it in months. How many months could he and his family live at their current standard if he stopped earning tomorrow? That number, 2 years ago, was 4. Today, it is 14. It will be 20 in 18 months if nothing changes. He cannot post that on LinkedIn. He cannot see it in a neighbor's driveway. It doesn't photograph well, and nobody knows about it. But it is the most real measure of financial progress he has ever tracked, because it is a measure of freedom. And freedom, unlike income, does not require a reference group to feel like enough. The feeling of financial sufficiency, of genuinely having enough, has never been a function of how much you have. It has always been a function of what you are comparing it against. Change the comparison, and the math of your financial life looks completely different. Not because anything changed in your bank account, because the question you are asking of it changed. Stop asking, "Do I have enough compared to them?" Start asking, do I have enough freedom to live the way I want to? Those are very different questions, and only one of them has an answer you can actually reach. In the final episode of this series, we're pulling everything together: loss aversion, the sunk cost fallacy, lifestyle inflation, anchoring bias, overconfidence, money scripts, relative deprivation, and showing you how they combine in the real world, in the decisions you make every single day without realizing it. We'll be looking at how the same psychological tricks used by casinos, online retailers, and your bank account all exploit the same handful of cognitive biases, and what a genuinely psychologically informed financial life looks like when you understand all of them. That is the next video. And if this series has been useful to you, if any of these videos name something you'd been feeling but couldn't explain, the most important thing you can do right now is subscribe so you don't miss the finale. I'll see you in the next one.